saying that if I only had 1 minute, here's what I'd hope you would get out of this presentation. That IT threats can be anticipated, responded to by using continuous resilience to help protect you, and it will also help assure your growth and profits. Basically, continuous resilience provides an early alert, a moving picture of the emerging opportunities and risks and threats of the IT nature, but also of other sorts as well. And that's in addition to the threats that can now be identified. Continuous resilience will prepare you to anticipate and be ready for almost any important change in the nature of IT or other threats. And in order to do this, I'll describe the two essential elements of continuous resilience. It's an early alert system, and it's some kind of a management board to deal with opportunities and risks or threats. I use risk or threat interchangeably. Risk is more from the financial area. Threat is a term used more broadly. I call this board the Opportunity and Threat Management Board, an OTMB, but you can call it whatever you want. But continuous resilience also creates competitive advantages and helps assure growth and profits. Now, let me go into detail about a little longer than 1 minute. First of all, the questions that I'll answer during this presentation. Resilience. What is continuous resilience? What does continuous resilience add to risk management? How is continuous resilience different from risk management? Why is continuous resilience now even more important than ever? What are the costs of not being resilient? And in the next questions, what are the two essential elements that I just mentioned of continuous resilience? The main questions that I'll answer during the presentation. Well, what is resilience? I'll read it just to emphasize. It's the ability to anticipate. Anticipate is a key element of continuous resilience that most risk management systems do not include. Secondly, it's the ability to respond quickly and profitably. And the reason that I emphasize quick and profitable is that ready to respond and respond more quickly, it creates a competitive advantage as compared with your competitors, and this allows increased profitability. So, as I use it, means the ability to anticipate and respond quickly and profitably to any important, sudden, unusual threat or risk or opportunity in the area of IT or any other area. So, what is resilience? Well, I use the word continuous in front of resilience because in my system, it is the ability to monitor and be ready to respond not only to those threats that have already been identified, but to those that are emerging, that are not the sort that management ordinarily would be focusing on. But if you have a monitoring process for things that are beginning to happen, then you have a continuous moving picture of those emerging threats and opportunities. How is resilience different from ordinary risk management? Well, primarily for the reasons that I've mentioned. It adds a moving picture to the snapshots of the present risks and opportunities that management can already identify. It creates an ongoing early alert process. Now, the importance is that a lot of companies use something called enterprise risk management or some other risk management process. Almost all of these processes start from those risks that can be identified now. They don't have a process for monitoring those that are emerging. So is resilience more important now than ever? Well, let's take a look at some of the emerging, some of the threats that are involved. The reason is that the number and seriousness of threats or risks and opportunities is increasing. And let's look at some of these to take an advantage. First, we're going to look at external threats, then we'll look at internal threats, and then we'll look at opportunities. And the list on the left of external threats or risks is one that applies to all companies, not just to IT companies. Cyber has jumped up from near the bottom when I first started this process 20 years ago Now it's the top threat for virtually all companies. It includes the full range of IT threats, loss of data, like in Sony, manipulation of data, destruction of data, theft of intellectual property through cyber attack. But let's look at some of the other threats that you'd also want to be aware of. There's been a recent economic downturn a few years ago that was unexpected. You're all aware of the terrible weather problems that we've increasingly been having, the drought in the West, Hurricane Sandy, Katrina, the tsunamis. These are terrible economic threats to companies that are hard to anticipate, but there are ways to be prepared for them. Terrorism is unfortunately increasing all over. But there's also the threat of major accidents. You can think of the terrible Lufthansa flight and other trains and other kinds of accidents that occur that might very well include senior executives of your company. Is very much in the emerging area is new regulations and laws and standards, so the certification for crisis management. It's very important to have a process in place that helps you identify when there is serious discussion about changes in regulations and laws and standards that might affect your business, and not wait until the law has been changed and then you have to respond too quickly. Power outages, it's a real threat from them or from storms. Others like the recent Ebola crisis, but there have been even worse global pandemics. The most famous one in 1918, when 1/3 of the world got sick and there were no jet planes, and 50 to 100 million people were killed when the population was much lower. Being prepared for pandemics is a critical issue to be ready for, even if there is not a present pandemic. Technologies is highly relevant for all of you, either new technologies that competitors come up with or that you can create yourself. Kidnapping, that is the holding of information hostage. Changes among non-governmental organizations can have an effect on many companies in terms of creating consumer interest or apprehension and not participating. Change of leadership in countries where you're working can have a profound effect. So it's much better to know about those early. Let's look at internal threats. These are not so often focused on, but they can be just as serious. The result of an external threat, it can also be created internally. Disgruntled employees can steal information. They can destroy it. Then breakdowns that are either accidental or intentional. We mentioned the possibility of one of your executives disappearing. So disruptions can occur either for external reasons like strikes or pandemics that close down trade, or they can be the result of accidents or incompetence within the organization, strikes and so on. All kinds of internal threats need to be anticipated. On the more happy side, let's look at opportunities. New technologies and innovations are often more of an opportunity than a threat, especially if you can bring them to market. You can create new markets by going into new countries. A lot of companies have expanded internationally into some of the emerging markets. They can create new processes online or using social media. For